I say sweep that accursed experience off the face of the earth and begin afresh. Why can't you do it?
Little Dorrit continues tonight at 8 on BBC One.
Meet the people who shaped the most influential period in European culture. The family who turned an entire city into a work of art.
The Medici were the first rich men to live fast and die young. They didn't just want to be rulers, they wanted to be absolute dictators.
The architect who built the perfect house.
Palladio is unique.
All the Palladian villas have great presence.
And the painter who created the concept of art history.
It's still the essential guide to the Italian Renaissance. Vasari's story is full of bawdy humour, outright lies, even murder. It's full of some of the very greatest art ever created.
The Art of Italy, tonight at 9 on BBC 4.
Time now, 1 o'clock, and with the BBC News on BBC One, Sophie Rayworth and Victoria Hollins.
The Prime Minister speaks of the public outrage over the abuse of two girls repeatedly raped by their father. Between them, they gave birth to 9 children after being abused by their father for more than 25 years.
The whole House and the whole country indeed will be outraged by those unspeakable events that have been reported as happening in Sheffield and in other parts of the country, and will be utterly appalled by the news of the systemic abuse of 2 sisters.
Britons are among thousands of tourists stranded in Thailand as anti-government protesters continue their siege of Bangkok airport. A high street icon, Woolworth's troubles deepen as its shares are suspended while talks continue over its future.
I'll have the latest in our special report on the conflict in Afghanistan. The fight against the Taliban is now threatening the peace in neighbouring Pakistan's frontier towns.
And her final voyage. These are live pictures of the QE2 as she arrives in Dubai, where she'll become a floating hotel.
Later on BBC London, Heathrow's owner says it'll get independent noise and air checks if a third runway is approved. And the real cost of the credit crunch, the estate agent threatened with losing his own home.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1 o'clock. Unspeakable abuse. That's what the Prime Minister has called the case of a father who repeatedly raped his 2 daughters over a period of more than 25 years. Between them, the girls gave birth to 9 children. The 56-year-old man was jailed for life yesterday. Gordon Brown told the Commons that MPs and the public were outraged and any necessary changes would be made to the system to ensure it never happened again. Our social affairs correspondent James Westhead reports.
It was in remote areas of Lincolnshire and South Yorkshire that the shocking brutality and abuse took place behind closed doors. Over more than 20 years, the man repeatedly raped his 2 daughters, fathering 9 children, moving house frequently to avoid detection. Yesterday, the 56-year-old was jailed for life at Sheffield Crown Court. The judge asked why the authorities had not picked up the abuse earlier.
The key thing to remember is that the man who committed these crimes was intent on terrifying and intimidating the people who were victims of his crimes. And they were extremely frightened by what he was doing to them, and also the threats which he made to them had they disclosed information to the authorities.
In the Commons, the Prime Minister expressed deep concern.
People will rightly want to know how such abuse could go on for so long without the authorities and the wider public services discovering it and taking action. And if there is a change to be made in the system and the system has failed, we will change the system as a result of the inquiries.
The case follows public outrage over the death of baby P. He died after horrendous abuse, despite numerous contacts with doctors and social workers. But now local authorities in England and Wales fear a knee-jerk response which could actually harm children. At a special child protection summit warning that social workers could become so scared of making mistakes, families will be broken up unnecessarily.
If we don't work hard to maintain a balanced approach, we will find the numbers of children entering care rising sharply, with some children who are objectively better off staying in the family, unable any longer to do so.
One mother told the BBC how just that happened to her. Social workers suspecting abuse took her son into care, ignoring evidence the parents were not to blame. They had to go to court to get their baby son back.
It was a 2.5 week long case, one of the most traumatic experiences of my life, and you know, the judge said all the evidence was completely acquitted us. There was no evidence.
A further worry is the public response will increase pressure on recruitment, worsening the shortage of professionals who work with children. An inquiry's been launched into the latest case, but there are also concerns about the long-term impact on vulnerable children. James Westhead, BBC News.
John Brain is at the Local Government Association Special Summit on Child Protection. It's a difficult balancing act for them, isn't it?
Some would say it's an impossible balancing act, Sophie, because the demand whenever you get a case like Baby P or the case in Sheffield is that lessons have to be learned. Well, there's always a danger that the wrong lessons can be learned if there is, as Margaret Eaton, the chairwoman of the Local Government Association, said, a knee-jerk reaction. You change the system to the other extreme, and as we've been hearing, there are already suggestions that children are being taken into care who might otherwise have been allowed to stay in their families. And social workers who are at the front line are really feeling the pressure. I've just been speaking to the Association of British Social Workers, their chief executive, Ian Johnston, who says morale has been badly affected, and he thinks it's inevitable that social workers will start leaving the profession, and others will be dissuaded from joining. Now, so the call from this summit has been for clear, rational debate. So there's not a rush in to change all the systems, but to find out where problems lie and to evolve the system over a period of time so it becomes much more solidified so that the right decisions are made in future.
John Brain, thank you very much. Hundreds of tourists, including many Britons, are stranded inside Bangkok's international airport by anti-government protesters as the crisis in Thailand deepens. The head of the country's powerful army asked the government to dissolve parliament and call new elections. The demonstrators have taken control of the air traffic control tower, forcing the cancellation of all flights and leaving thousands more Britons unable to leave the country. From Bangkok, Quentin Somerville reports.
With all flights cancelled, the only thing leaving Bangkok's main airport were buses taking tourists back to their hotels. It's the start of the peak holiday season. Thousands of holidaymakers were left confused and frustrated, uncertain as to when they might get home.
Oh, it's crazy. I don't know why this is happening. It's really crazy. But what can you do?
I don't really understand what's going on with the politics, but I don't want to know. But all I know is I think it's bad form.
The airline didn't give us much information to start with, but since then they've started coming through and telling us that we possibly might be out of here in the morning.
But that doesn't seem likely. The political crisis here has deepened, with the head of Thailand's army calling on the Prime Minister to resign.
We are suggesting to the government that they should let the people have another chance to make a decision on the future of this country in a new election.
But the government said this is just a ploy, a military coup by the back door, and rejected the general's demands. Back at the airport, the many thousands of yellow-shirted anti-government protesters are refusing to budge. Tourism is vital to the Thai economy. The longer they stay, the more financial damage they cause. Well organised with food and bedding, they appear to be going nowhere. And that's also true for the tens of thousands of stranded holidaymakers. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Bangkok.
It's one of the icons of the British High Street. Woolworths has been going since 1909. But now its future hangs in the balance. This morning the company's shares were suspended as talks continue to rescue the firm. At stake is the future of 840 shops and their staff across Britain. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson is at a Woolworths in West London. How serious is this for Woolworths?
Sophie, Woolworths is in very deep trouble indeed. This is a company that's on the brink of a collapse, a high street institution that's desperately trying to stave off administration. And Woolworths is in the midst of trying to broker a very complicated rescue deal. On the retail side, an American outfit called Hilco is negotiating to buy up the 840 stores, including this one, and trying to restructure the company. But what's emerged today is that Woolworths is trying to sell its stake in a successful DVD publishing company called 2Entertain to BBC Worldwide. This has been a successful, profitable joint venture with a commercial arm of the BBC, but it's by no means certain that this deal will go ahead, although talks are officially underway. And this deal is seen as vital to the overall success of the rescue deal, and time is running out. We understand that the deal has got to be done by the end of this week.
Emma, thank you very much. Credit card companies are being warned that they could face an investigation by the Office of Fair Trading if they fail to stamp out bad practice in the industry. The government is holding a summit this afternoon with credit card industry officials after seeing evidence that some card lenders are failing to pass on cuts in interest rates or even hiking up rates, customers struggling to repay their debts. The European Commission has laid out a package of measures to give a €200 billion boost to the EU's economy. The plan encourages countries to take action themselves by cutting taxes and targeting investment in industries like car making. The Commission says the measures need to be implemented across all 27 EU member countries for it to have maximum benefit. The care system for terminally ill people in England has been heavily criticised by the government spending watchdog, the National Audit Office. It says that most people would prefer to die at home, but more than half end their days in hospital, wasting money on needless treatment. Here's our health correspondent, Branwen Jeffries.
This is the home that Malcolm Leighton built with his wife. He's still grief-stricken from the loss of his beloved Monica. She died from cancer earlier this year. Now Malcolm is suffering regret that she didn't die at home.
I think she would have been happier in her own home that we spent so much time in and she was so involved in. But one listened to the words of wisdom from the medics, and that's the way we went.
Malcolm's wife was rushed into a hospice when her condition deteriorated. She died that night after he'd returned home. Today's report says there's an even bigger problem with admissions to hospitals. Too many people are rushed in during their last days. Money could be saved and spent instead on care at home or in a hospice.
Most people are not well served and they're not getting the services they need and which would make those last days of their life much more acceptable, and they would be more comfortable, and people would be left feeling that there was something worthwhile in the system.
Hospices like St Christopher's have pioneered dignity for dying patients. Some need care on the ward, but 800 more are supported at home. The NHS contributes towards the costs of hospice care in England. Today's report says that funding has to be more reliable.
The amount the NHS locally spends on specialised end-of-life care varies enormously, from just £154 per person to £1,684, a huge disparity.
The report also says more training is urgently needed in the NHS. Hospice staff are comfortable with having difficult conversations.
By a difficult conversation, I mean being able to say to someone that death is now a real possibility and finding out from them gently and respectfully where they would like their care to be.
Malcolm wants to scatter his wife's ashes here. End-of-life care has been reviewed in most of the UK. Today's report says strong leadership is needed to make change happen in England. Branwen Jeffries, BBC News.
The man accused of imprisoning Shannon Matthews in his flat has denied being in control of the kidnap plan. Giving evidence for a second day, Michael Donovan repeated his defence that he was being threatened by Shannon's mother, Karen, and was frightened. Our correspondent, Danny Savage, is at Leeds Crown Court. Tell us a bit more about what he said, Danny.
Well, Sophie, Michael Donovan gave his evidence yesterday, and today he was cross-examined not only by the prosecution but also by Karen Matthews' barrister, who put it to him on the day that Shannon disappeared that he, Michael Donovan, had pushed her into his car, and when he got her back to his flat, he was the one that made up the rules that were to keep her quiet during the 24 days she was there. Michael Donovan denied those charges. He also said the presence of an elasticated strap that was found tied to a roof beam in his flat, which the prosecution say may have been used to restrain Shannon, was a mystery to him. And the barrister also suggested that it was Michael Donovan and members of his family that had come up with the plot to kidnap her, Shannon, and were controlling it. And Michael Donovan repeatedly said to those suggestions, no.
And what did the prosecution say to Michael Donovan?
Well, they showed closed-circuit television pictures from supermarkets and petrol stations that Michael Donovan had visited, showing him in them during the time that Shannon was missing. Now, he said at times Shannon was in his car, other times she was locked back in his flat. Now, he says he was doing this because he was scared of Karen Matthews, and that the prosecution say, though, that Michael Donovan was acting perfectly normally and he didn't seem to be scared at all. There was an exchange just before lunch which summed it up, really. The prosecution barrister said to him, "Are you trying to blame Karen Matthews for everything?" And Michael Donovan said, "She made the plan, I had to go along with it." He denies the charges and the trial continues, Sophie.
Danny, thank you very much. The Times almost 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. The Prime Minister says that any changes necessary will be made after the unspeakable abuse by a father who raped his daughters for over 25 years. They gave birth to 9 of his children. And coming up, here she comes. These are live pictures of the QE2 arriving in Dubai, her final resting place before she's turned into a floating hotel. Huge crowds, a fly past and fireworks await her.
Later on BBC London, crossing the capital, London's bridges get new protection from surrounding development. And a landmark for 3 centuries, now St Paul's celebrates its birthday and achieving its £40 million fundraising target.
Rarely a day goes past when Afghanistan isn't in the news. The battle against the Taliban continues to rage. This week, my colleague George Alagai is in Helmand province to assess the extent of the challenges facing Britain's troops and the people of Afghanistan. George.
Thank you, Sophie, and hello from the British military headquarters in Lashkargah. It's dusk here, and I've just watched a convoy of British soldiers heading out of camp on patrol into what will almost certainly be another tense night. Increasingly, though, the battle against the Taliban happens not just here, but across the border in neighbouring Pakistan, and that threatens the peace and security in frontier towns there. Under increasing pressure from US aerial attacks, under increasing pressure, it has to be said, from Pakistani ground forces, Taliban militants are retreating into towns like Peshawar. Our South Asia correspondent, Damien Grammaticus, is there.
Well, this is the Peshawar Police Anti-Terrorism Squad on patrol on the streets of this city. This is a city from which foreigners have largely fled in recent weeks because there have been high-profile attacks targeting specifically foreigners here. An attempt on the life of the American consul here, the American aid worker killed, the Afghan and Iranian consuls, both of them abducted, all from these streets. And what that's meant is it's been designed by the militants to spread fear through Peshawar, to try and destabilise the government, if you like, to put it on the back foot. Because what's been happening around Peshawar, away from here, is that the military has been moving into areas to try and clear them of Taliban and militants in the tribal agencies nearby, Bajor and Moman. Some of those are literally just 10, 15 kilometres away from here. You hit the tribal areas. And what the police are saying here now is that the result has been the militants, under pressure in those areas, have been pushed out, and they are now ballooning, if you like, spreading out, threatening cities like Peshawar, trying to open up new fronts against the Pakistani police and army to try and spread their resources even thinner. So here what we're seeing is extra patrols on the streets of Peshawar, an attempt to improve security here, to try to win back the confidence, if you like, that foreigners can come back here, that the government is under control, but the police are under pressure, and they say they are outgunned by the militants.
Damien Grammaticus there. Now, with the number of British troops falling victim to roadside bombs and landmines, there's growing concern about the use of snatch Land Rovers. Critics say they simply don't offer enough protection. Well, I've been looking at one alternative. What you're looking at is a massive armoured vehicle, and its presence here in Afghanistan tells you quite a lot about the nature of the warfare British forces are engaged in. The head-to-head confrontations with the insurgents, with the Taliban, that's quite rare these days. More likely now is that British troops are hit when they're on the move with explosive devices like landmines. Now, this is an expensive, important bit of kit, and the man who's got to look after them is Sergeant Beck. What's so special about this vehicle?
This vehicle, the protection it affords the troops is fantastic. The troops themselves tell us they don't like anything else. This is what they like, this is what they want, and it's just a fantastic piece of kit that we've got.
What kind of work can you do in these massive vehicles?
I mean, the vehicles are used on convoys, escorting convoys, protection work, and even it can be used to carry troops as a troop carrier.
Must take quite a lot of maintenance to keep it on the road for you and your team.
It does take a fair bit of maintenance, but then again, anything that weighs over 20 tonne on this sort of terrain, used as often and regular as these are, it's going to take maintenance, and to us, it's just not an issue.
All right. Thank you very much, Sergeant Beck. Well, you've heard it from Sergeant Beck. This is the vehicle of choice for British troops. The good news is there are some more on the way, but in truth, there are also questions about why that process is taking quite so long. Now, Britain is responsible for this huge province of Helmand, and the diplomat who's in charge of that is Hugh Powell. He's with me now. Hugh Powell, yesterday we heard that another British soldier had died. What are you achieving that justifies putting British soldiers at risk?
Well, first of all, nothing can make up for the personal tragedy for the family of Maureen Lucas or the 125 other soldiers who've also died. All I can do is salute their courage. Second, I would say, though, that civilians and military alike, I think we feel we are achieving two things. First, preventing the return of the misery of life under the Taliban here in Helmand. We're also preventing the return of a strategic threat to the government of Afghanistan and the risk of international terrorism, again, putting down roots.
Ordinary Afghans have been telling us that corruption is a problem. Do you agree, and how big a problem is it?
Absolutely. There's no ducking that it's a huge problem. This is, I think Transparency International has it in the top 10 most corrupt countries in the world, and here in Helmand, we're in one of the narco capitals of the world. The key is leadership from the top, from the Afghan system. I think sacking the National Transport Minister earlier this week was a good example, and here in Helmand, Governor Mangal has set a very good example by removing the chief judge. Since that happened, the number of cases dealt with by provincial courts has gone up 400%.
All right, Hugh Powell, we have to leave it there. Okay. Thank you very much. And that really is a challenge facing the British here. They can only go at the pace of the local government, of the Afghan government, and not at the pace that British public opinion wants, or indeed what ordinary Afghans want. Sophie, back to you.
George, thank you very much. Now, nearly 3/4 of households in England think that controversial pay-as-you-throw schemes for dealing with household waste would be fair, according to a survey for BBC News. More than 70% said we should be rewarded financially if we create less waste and recycle more. Our environment analyst, Roger Harrabin, reports.
We're living in a world of waste. Landfill sites are an increasing problem. And in the UK, local authorities will soon be able to run pilot schemes in which people are charged extra if they throw away more rubbish. At Leeds, in the north of England, Phil Gomersall grows much of what he eats and tries to reduce waste.
Whatever I can reuse, I'll reuse, and whatever I can recycle, I'll recycle.
His neighbour Paul Metcalfe has a different attitude.
Plastic, cardboard, polythene, anything. All goes in the bin. Out of sight, out of mind.
Do you think it's fair that we're both getting charged the same amount of council tax when I'm actually recycling and you're not?
I do think it's fair. If I had to pay more, would I recycle? Probably not.
In a growing number of countries, Paul would be charged more if he throws away more. At Bonheiten in rural Belgium, They have what's known as a chip and bin scheme. It seems to be working. It's a high-tech system here which relies on this computer chip, which in turn is read by this device here. So when the bin man puts the bin on the truck, the bin is weighed, up it goes, and the charge is deducted from the householder's account. This scheme was controversial, but no more.
The more you recycle, the less waste you put out, the less you pay. So it's a very fair system.
In South Korea, people recycle with their neighbours. For non-recyclables, they have to buy these special bags. In Roncada, Italy, people pay extra every time their waste bin's collected. It sent the town to the top of Italy's recycling league. In Seattle, on America's west coast, families pay an annual fee depending on the size of their bin. If you want to pay less, you get a smaller bin. Pay-as-you-throw schemes are often controversial. They may encourage dumping. But there does seem to be a steady worldwide trend towards paying for our waste. Roger Harrabin, BBC News.
Castle Howard, the wetlands of Somerset, they're some of the most beautiful places in England, and they're among more than 100 such areas which are being targeted by Natural England to get a share of billions of pounds in grants. Our rural affairs correspondent, Jeremy Cook, reports.
They are among England's most treasured landscapes, from Hadrian's Wall in Northumberland, from Castle Howard in Yorkshire, south to the Chiltern Hills. Just some of the 110 areas which have been selected to receive more public money, a push to protect the environment. It's all part of the changing way farmers are paid subsidies. Most of the cash allocated by the EU still gets paid on the basis of how much food a farm can produce. But now £2.9 billion will be spent over the next 5 years for conservation. And Natural England has drawn up a list of areas where much of it will be spent.
It's an improvement on what we've done in the past. We're going to be working with farmers to deliver green schemes within those areas, which not only make sense for their business, but really make sense for the environment.
By protecting wildlife like these red kite, landowners will receive grants. In the Chilterns, Murray Graham is already being paid for environmental schemes aimed at attracting more wild birds onto his farm.
It's good for the also for the hedgerow birds.
It's about rewarding landowners for their stewardship of the countryside. And while some farmers worry that this kind of project takes the focus off their main effort, which is food production, Murray sees no conflict.
The conservation schemes were built round the farming.
So it's not at odds with each other?
Not at all, not at all. Once I made up my mind we were going into this scheme, the conservation had to fit in with it, basically pretty intensive farming.
The hope is that targeting more money in this way will improve and conserve the landscape for generations to come. But all of this money is not just about conserving the landscape and encouraging biodiversity. It's also about improving access for those of us who enjoy visiting the most beautiful parts of the English countryside. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, in the Chilterns.
Now, since she was launched in 1967, the QE2 has carried more than 2.5 million passengers, including kings, queens, prime ministers and presidents. And here she is, arriving right now at her final resting place, Dubai, where she'll be turned into a floating hotel. Well, our correspondent, Paul Wood, is there watching her arrival, and it's quite a reception she's been given.
Yes, Sophie, they're about to throw a huge party. After all, they've spent some £60 million acquiring one of the world's most iconic vessels. You can see her just behind me, steaming into dock for the last time. As you say, she's going to be converted into a floating hotel. The funnel is going to be removed. It'll be a 4,000 square metre penthouse. They're going to bring up the 9 engines from the engine room and make that into an entertainment complex. Now, that is controversial to some QE2 enthusiasts. They say that is gutting the ship. It is not in keeping with its traditions. The new owners, however, would like to see that as a symbol of the economic vitality of Dubai. It's going to be moored on the remarkable Palm Jumeirah man-made island, the world's biggest man-made island. Now, it is coincidentally 40 years to the day since this vessel began its sea trials. In literally just a few minutes' time, she will anchor here. The captain will give the order for the engines to come to a full stop, and that long and proud tradition of the QE2 as an ocean-going liner will have come to an end.
Paul Wood, wonderful pictures there of the QE2 arriving in Dubai. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's have a look at the weather now with Thomas Schaffnacker. Hello.
Hi there, Sophie. I think the clouds look a bit grey in Dubai there. Cloudy for us as well, but certainly chilly this morning. Look at the temperatures. This is earlier on this morning. -1 in Portsmouth on the south coast. The north of the UK, 11 degrees. So huge temperature contrast. And what's happening over the next few hours? Well, the mild air through the morning into the afternoon is sinking southwards, washing those blue colours away. So for most of us, I think this afternoon it's going to be a little bit less cold than it has been, not just yesterday, but the last few days. But as I say, fairly cloudy skies. Now, there are a few places around the UK today where we are going to see at least a bit of sunshine. For example, around the Murray Firth, Aberdeenshire, some good sunny spells here, and this has been the case so far this morning into the afternoon. The same goes to the east of the Pennines. We'll see some breaks in the cloud, but really wherever you are across the country today, the chances are that you will have the cloudy sky, so pretty grey sheet of layer in the sky for us. Temperatures of around about 9 degrees in the south, so still a bit of a nip in the air. It's not desperately mild, and the same goes for the southwest of the country and into Wales as well. But a few glimmers of brightness not out of the question here as well. And for Northern Ireland, cloudy and temperatures of around about 10 degrees. Now, as we go through the course of the night, not an awful lot changes across the UK, really. One thing that I would say, it's certainly not going to be anywhere near as cold in the south as it was yesterday. So generally frost-free to come for most of us. In fact, in the south of the country, during the nights and the early hours of Thursday morning, temperatures will probably dip to around about 8 degrees, no lower than that. In the north of the UK, starting to see some cooler weather coming in. That's because we have a cold front, additionally bringing some rain and some gusty conditions. So this is in the morning. During the afternoon, the cold front will be sweeping southwards, and then there'll be a big contrast in the temperature tomorrow. In the south, around about 11 or 12 degrees, but it won't feel like it because of the cloud cover, especially if you're in the rain, it won't feel very nice. To the other side of this cold front, we've got fresher, brighter conditions, but gusty winds and some squally showers, especially across Scotland. So contrasts for Thursday. Now, as far as Friday's concerned, a dreary picture in the south has to be said. Not very pleasant. Cloudy, rain. As far as the north of the UK is concerned, we'll get a little bit of sunshine. Now, as far as the weekend's concerned, the spirits are pretty low, well, at least as far as the weather's concerned, but whatever the case may be for you and me, the weather isn't looking particularly brilliant, has to be said, both on Saturday and Sunday. It's overcast, it's raining, but I wouldn't say it's going to be a write-off completely. There will be some glimmers of brightness, particularly across western parts of the UK, but it'll be cold. So just to recap today, a cloudy day, and then tomorrow some gusty showers on the way, especially in the north of the country. That's it.
Thomas, thank you very much. At 1:30, a reminder of our top story. Gordon Brown is promising that lessons must be learned from the case of a man from Sheffield who repeatedly raped his 2 daughters over more than 2 decades, fathering 9 children by them. Still to come on the BBC News Channel in the next half hour, we'll be back in Dubai as the QE2 arrives at her new home as she becomes a luxury floating hotel. That's it, though. Now on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.
Welcome to BBC London News. The owners of Heathrow say they'll accept an independent body with the power to limit flights for environmental reasons. BAA claim that if limits are breached, the airport will not expand further. The airport's also saying it'll attempt to cut delays rather than try to squeeze in more flights. Well, our political editor Tim Donovan is at City Hall for us this afternoon. First of all, Tim, what are we to make of all of this?
Well, as you say, the first thing BAA want, they'd like to be able to land and take off aircraft on the 2 runways simultaneously. At the moment it has to be done separately. It's called mixed mode, and they say if that happened, then they would guarantee they wouldn't have to increase flights, they'd just be able anyway to cut delays. But the second thing is that they're saying that they want to see, they'd accept, in fact they'd welcome the creation of an independent assessor who could decide if noise and pollution levels were being breached, and then put a cap on the number of flights. And they're saying that would be the guarantee if a 3rd runway went ahead and people in the industry agree.
They have an interest in developing the airport as we do, but when it comes to the environmental limits, it's very clear the governments have set down specific limits, very specific limits, and we know that these need to be measured independently and objectively to ensure that any development of the airport is kept within these 2 limits.
But is this a big enough concession to win people over, do you think?
I think that's unlikely. I mean, the Conservatives say they think BAA have a record of going back on promises they've made. Environmental groups like Greenpeace are saying this is kind of arrogance on the part of BAA. And London's mayor here at City Hall had his own way of putting it today.
The idea that BAA is somehow going to magic out of nowhere, an independent assessor who is going to validate the commitment of the airlines not to produce more than a certain amount of CO2 or noise, it's complete phooey. It's about, it's like the government saying that having raised the top rate of tax, it'll never go up again. It is just absolute tripe.
People are pointing to the history of such promises and guarantees. At the time of Terminal 5, BAA said a third runway wouldn't be necessary, they wouldn't back it. But that's what happens, or that's what is shown to us by the history of aviation.
Tim, for now, thanks very much indeed. Hundreds of cyclists who take part in a monthly bike ride through London will no longer have to give the police advance notice. The critical mass ride involves cyclists taking to the street to celebrate safe cycling. The House of Lords allowed an appeal by one of the participants against a ruling that gave the Met Police right to be notified. New figures suggest house prices are falling so fast, those trying to sell their homes have cut an average of £28,000 from the asking price in the last 2 weeks alone. Meanwhile, thousands of people are losing their jobs, putting their homes at risk. One of them is Jason Cheeseman, an estate agent who got in touch with BBC London. Gareth Furby went to meet him.
This is Jason Cheeseman walking the streets of Epsom in Surrey. He needs to find a job quickly.
I've applied for job seekers allowance, and that's going to be in the region of £60 a week, which is a long, long way from what I used to earn.
This money was a gift from friends and relatives to help pay the bills.
It's embarrassing more than anything. Pride, you really don't want to ask family for money, but we have no other option.
Just 4 weeks ago, Jason Cheeseman was a sales director at a firm of estate agents. But as the property market stalled, so did his career.
I was made redundant just through lack of sales that were happening. Now, the only thing I can do now is wander around the estate agents and give my CV in.
How are you?
Yeah, very well. I wondered if you had any vacancies, really. I'm sort of...
Take a seat.
Thank you. I'm looking around for work.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, currently we don't have any vacancies.
I didn't expect so, but
in this tight climate.
Daddy. Hiya.
Hi, how you doing?
How did you get on?
Yeah, CVs are out.
In the good times, with his wife Lisa, who's a recruitment consultant, the household income was £100,000 a year.
There's just no jobs anywhere.
Oh, baby.
Now they have a new baby called Lily to support and a huge mortgage bill.
Without either of us earning, they're going to be knocking on the door very soon.
Got married to have a family, so the timing couldn't be any worse for Jason losing his job.
Just one story of one estate agent, his wife and child. And there may be many others across London in a similar position. Gareth Furby, BBC London News.
A bill to ensure retailers cut down on the number of shopping bags they hand out has been withdrawn by London councils. The decision comes after the government said it would impose a minimum charge for bags if shops don't significantly cut down on the amount they hand out. A decision on a controversial hotel development overlooking Hampton Court Palace will be made later today. Developers also want to build flats and a nursing home on the site that's been empty for 20 years. They say it'll benefit the community, but other locals oppose it, including the palace itself. Well, we take them for granted, but travelling around London would be far harder if they weren't there. Today, the capital's bridges are getting the recognition they probably deserve. 7 of them have just been given listed status. Well, Phil Lavelle is on the river this lunchtime. So, Phil, first of all, which ones have been listed?
Yeah, they're right across London, actually, Victoria. We'll start here with Lambeth. This is now a Grade 2 listed bridge, as is Chelsea Bridge and the Richmond Railway Bridge. Also, further down the river, we have the Cremorne Bridge, Twickenham Bridge and Vauxhall, which is just one along. They are now Grade 2 star, as is Hammersmith Bridge. Now that star effectively means that they were already important. Now they have that extra bit of protection just in case.
But what does that actually mean, though?
Well, it's all about protecting them, really. I mean, of course, these bridges are very beautiful. They're not going to go anywhere. But say, for argument's sake, Lambeth Council, which controls this part of the world, decided it wanted to paint the bridge, it wanted to change the lights to something that were a bit more modern, a bit cheaper. Then it would have a bit of a fight on its hands with English heritage. Also, any developers who wanted to build right here by the bridge would have to make sure their buildings were in keeping with the area surrounding this bridge. And of course, everyone's got their favourite bridge, everyone's got their favourite story, and they are so important to London, as the Culture Secretary Andy Burnham told me earlier this morning.
I can remember when I moved to London as a young northern lad in my early 20s all those years ago. I can remember using the bridges to get my bearings in the city. You know, you kind of worked out which place connects to which, and I think, you know, because people consider themselves a South Londoner or North Londoner, these are the linchpins of what holds London together, and I think they're crucial to London.
And no matter what side of the river you live on, everyone, of course, has got their favourite bridge. We spoke to one woman this morning who told me that every time she crosses the bridge, it makes her realise why she loves living in London. Another woman told me she collects mugs, keyrings, tea towels with pictures of the Hammersmith Bridge, and who could forget the Americans who tried to buy London Bridge.
Bill, thanks very much indeed. Well, it's been a London landmark for 3 centuries, and St Paul's Cathedral even survived the Blitz, while many buildings around it were reduced to rubble. Today, it's constantly battling to raise money for repairs and renovation. To celebrate its 300th birthday, Tim Moffat was allowed a special behind-the-scenes tour.
Magnificent, beautiful, inspiring. St Paul's is the great survivor. Bombs and fire have failed to destroy it. So much more than a religious site, it is a national monument. Today the cathedral celebrates the 300th anniversary of the topping out ceremony, when the uppermost stone, just below the gold crucifix, was put into place.
The architect, Sir Christopher Wren, was 76 years old at the time, too old to climb the many, many steps and to take part in the ceremony himself. However, the fact that he had lived to see his cathedral built from scratch made him unique.
It is an amazing space. Sir Christopher Wren was an extraordinary man. To conceive what it was going to be like to be in this building is so exciting.
It is, though, an experience that will cost you a £10 admission fee. Cathedrals in this country don't receive direct government funding, so St Paul's, like all others, has to raise its own money. But unlike other cathedrals, St Paul's has reached its recent fundraising target of £40 million. It was, however, a struggle, and the situation exasperates many.
I think it's really rather sad that one of the greatest buildings which draws tourists to England, this building, really has received no government support for what it's trying to do.
At St Paul's, financial challenges are ongoing, and they're having to think of new ways to boost visitors. So, rarely seen parts of the cathedral could soon be opened up. Like all cathedrals, St Paul's will have to work hard to secure its future, even if it has a unique and glorious past.
Tim Moffat reporting there. Now, wounds appear to be healing at Arsenal following their passage to the knockout stages of the Champions League late last night, and the reintroduction of former captain William Gallas. Gallas had been stripped of the captaincy and dropped from the side after criticising his teammates. Garrett Hughes reports.
Arsenal may not be the happiest workplace in the country, but it's certainly a steadier ship with William Gallas back on board. The Frenchman, whose outburst against some of his fellow Gunners enraged his employers, his evening looked up thereafter. He even briefly thought he'd scored.
Touch from Gallas, flags up.
So while Gallas initially struggled, so did the rest of his team. BBC London News.
Right, time for a look at the weather now with Pete. And Pete, pretty grey here still. What about Bordeaux, though?
Yeah, it might be a long way south, Victoria, but I think it's going to be colder in Bordeaux than in London for those Chelsea fans who've headed that way. We've got commentary for you on BBC London Radio and on the website. Phil Parry tonight, along with Clive Walker. Now, closer to home, we've got the cloud, and we're going to have it for the rest of the week, and eventually we are going to get wet. Not today, though. The cloud not quite thick enough. The westerly breeze starting to blow some milder air across the London area, and with that cloud blanket over us tonight, it's not going to be quite so chilly. No frost tonight. Temperatures holding up at around 7 or 8 Celsius. Could turn a wee bit misty up over the tops of the high ground. So I'm talking about the tops of the North Downs and the tops of the Chiltern Hills. Tomorrow, a cloudy day. We will have a stronger southwesterly wind tomorrow, so that might rip the odd hole in the cloud cover, but equally it'll blow some outbreaks of rain across us. But temperatures tomorrow afternoon, well, they're going to get up to something like 10 or 11 Celsius. So the outlook is good news if you don't like the cold, but bad news if you're a sad sufferer and you don't like the wet. Back to you, Victoria.
Oh dear, thanks Pete. That's it from me. Riz Latif will be here at 6:30 for now. Bye-bye.
A proud mum with a painful secret in Doctors, next on BBC One.
With an open mind, you can open doors, travel open roads and open your eyes to a wider world. With an open mind, you can go anywhere.
This is the very edge.
Let's do it.
Let your passion lead the way. Open your mind with Open University programmes on the BBC.
That is the best day at work I've ever had.
For more information, call 0845 366 8010 for a free magazine or visit us online at open2.net.
This place, what you're doing, is everything I want, everything I've been dreaming of.
In the end, they will take this place from us because we're too weak to hold on to it.
I'm not authorising a manhunt.
You don't have to.
Survivors continues Tuesday at 9 on BBC One. See the previous episode on BBC iPlayer.
Is the squeaky clean image of a TV hostess too good to be true? Diagnosis murder in half an hour. First on BBC One, a couple at rock bottom.